So Mac asked me to come up here and lighten the mood a little bit with a discussion of taxes. You can stretch your legs, but do it in the vestibule because this is riveting stuff, and I want to make sure everybody who's in here can hear it. And important that you first hear my disclaimer, which is that none of this is tax advice. I am not a tax professional. In fact, I spent college as one of those poet types and learned pretty much everything I know about taxes as a baby investment banker and following this guy. Where's my slide? That's John Malone. He is the progenitor of the Liberty Media companies, and along with an Omaha local here, probably one of the two best financial engineers in the world, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But I think it's worth starting with some history. And I'll try to do that in a nonpartisan way. Anybody who has seen Hamilton knows that the early republic was funded primarily through excise taxes and tariffs. In fact, other than an income tax that was constitutionally dubious during the Civil War, income taxes didn't exist until the 16th Amendment made them possible in 1913. Interestingly, corporate taxes preceded individual income taxes. They started in 1909 because they weren't structured as an income tax. And that goes a long way to explaining the system of double taxation that we have here in the United States. So, we saw cap gains become different than individual taxes in 21, the beloved AMT in 1969, and then a big change in the tax code in 1986, and that includes the repeal of what was left of what's known as the General Utilities Doctrine, which allowed companies to distribute appreciated property tax-free, and now we've had to find other ways to do that. A couple of observations on this slide, which I know is difficult to see, and I realize that showing just top marginal tax rates is not all that useful without any context, but notwithstanding that, taxes were pretty high, and they were pretty volatile, often changing year to year 100 years ago. And that's not good tax policy. The other thing is that taxes tended to start low, and guess what? Go in one direction. The corporate tax was originally 1% in 1909. So with that context, it's interesting to think about the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the latest change to the code, and that includes two provisions, a 1% excise tax on buybacks and a 15% minimum book tax, requiring all companies keep a third set of books. And both of these provisions were likely aimed at Berkshire Hathaway, amongst others. And it caused Warren to write about Berkshire having given at the office in the last letter. And Warren has written about taxes a lot, I think, as you know, including echoing the conceit of Ben Graham that governments are every corporation's silent partner. And Warren has done a masterful job of being efficient in taxes, whether it's use of the dividends received deduction, accelerated depreciation, the insurance company rules, and doing some pretty fancy financial engineering himself, including utilizing my favorite piece of financial engineering, which is the cash-rich split-off. I'll describe that in a moment. It's also worth noting that a good way to get yourself on Warren's naughty list was to be not tax efficient. And that landed Irene Rosenfeld, who was CEO of Kraft, on his naughty list when she sold in a taxable transaction DiGiorno Pizza to Nestle to fund the acquisition of Cadbury. And Warren had this to say about it. It was not great. Irene's issue was that she didn't read my financial engineering playbook, which is available outside, and we can give it to you if it's not out there in soft copy form as well. It didn't come out till 2017, so she couldn't have read it, but hopefully many of you do. And so for the next couple minutes, I'm just going to go through the Cliff Notes version of the Cliff Notes of this white paper, starting with spin-offs and split-offs, split-offs being the non-pro rata version of spin-offs. So spin-offs are now, in the absence of the General Utilities Doctrine, a way for corporations to distribute appreciated properties tax-free as long as they meet the provisions of Section 355 of the Code, and those include, amongst other things, that the company has to have control of the subsidiary, distribute control of the subsidiary, not being using a spin-off as a device for avoiding taxes, and that spun company include a business that has been conducted continuously for 5 years. That's known as the ATB. I put some recent spin-offs, both large and small, here, including a prospective spin. It's Kenvue, the consumer products business that's getting spun from J&J because it's a slightly different flavor. It was preceded by an IPO of that company, which happened a couple days ago. Next, you've got another fairly common technique known as the reverse Morris trust, more commonly known as the spin merge, where company A spins off a business and then merges it immediately with company B. And that happened just recently with regard to AT&T spinning off Warner Brothers and merging it immediately with Discovery. The main requirement there is that company A shareholders must own greater than 50% of the vote and value of that new company. Number three, again, this is my favorite, a little complicated, cash-rich split-offs. I'll just illustrate it by example. I referred to Berkshire having used this 3 times. Interestingly, Liberty used it 3 times, and there have been a total of 8 of these done in the last 20 years. So in the case of Berkshire, they took their appreciated Procter & Gamble stake, was worth about $5 billion, dropped it into a subsidiary, and exchanged that with a subsidiary of Procter & Gamble, which had $2 billion in cash, and Duracell. And that exchange was done tax-free. Of course, to get P&G to participate in it, Berkshire had to share some of its tax savings with P&G, but again, a win-win for both of those companies. Fourth piece of financial engineering, these are rare today. They were pretty common 25 years ago. My guess is they'll come back maybe in another 25 years, although I would not be counting on a Berkshire Energy tracker stock. These are called tracker stocks. And these can be used when it's not feasible to do a spinoff, when you don't have the tax attributes to meet Section 355 conditions that I described earlier. The one remaining group of tracker stocks are the ones I have here. They relate to Liberty Media. Even this will be coming to an end shortly when Liberty spins Liberty Braves, my favorite stock, by the way, in June. I won't spend any time on this one. MLPs, REITs, and yieldcos, these aren't as popular of late, but again, a way that companies have been able to reduce taxes overall. And they'll end up with capital returns. There, as you know, 5 ways that companies can use their capital or cash flow. Internal growth, M&A, reducing debt or building cash, paying out distributions, including dividends, and doing share repurchases, particularly in some interesting ways like a Dutch auction or accelerated share repurchase. Obviously, dividends have their own issues with taxes, but buybacks are a little better. And again, Warren has written about buybacks and made the case for buybacks in a number of his letters. And so we come back to the question of why financial engineering matters. In our case, it's because our methodology is known as private market value with a catalyst. Every company has a public and a private market value. Private market value being what an informed buyer would pay to own the entirety of a business, and we look for one or more events that will drive the public price closer to the private price. And those can be a lot of things, call them catalysts here. One of our favorites is financial engineering, because it can do that by itself, or it can set a company up for additional catalysts late down the road, which further surface value. More broadly, financial engineering can do a lot of things. It can increase strategic flexibility, better align incentives and capital structure with the business. And for individual investors, it can serve as a source of ideas. And this is pretty well documented that spins can be a good source of new ideas. I would end with a caveat here that sometimes you just have to give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And, companies have fallen into the trap. John Malone has fallen into the trap. I've fallen into the trap. I think most individual investors have fallen into the trap of letting taxes dictate the fundamentals rather than the other way around. I think somebody who hasn't fallen into the trap, of course, is Warren, and again, the exception that proves the rule and so many things. So that's it on financial engineering. Again, I will be available to all of you outside. We have copies of the playbook if you're interested. And other than that, I think we're going to get back on schedule and hear from Lindsay. So thank you all for your attention and being here.
Investors should carefully consider the investment objectives, risk, charges, and expenses of the fund before investing. The prospectus, which contains more complete information about this and other matters, should be read carefully before investing. To obtain a prospectus, please call 1-800-GABELLI or visit www.gabelli.com.